Welcome everyone to our presentation on Martin Arnold, who is an experimental Austrian filmmaker who specializes in radical deconstructions of existing films. The most well-known of these are his short films derived from the footage of Hollywood classics. To call his work a recut or a re-edit would be understating his work. His obsessive replaying of frames make for gasping, short-circuiting art that feels in tension with itself. His rhythmic and sensual shots are at their core interrogations of Hollywood and what lies underneath. Today we'll be examining various aspects of Arnold's film career, while breaking down his techniques and ideology when it comes to his many pieces of work. We'll start off by exploring how film became his focus, what his influences are, and his artistic movements. Then we'll move forward towards analyzing Arnold's own words on how he explains his own philosophy on film. We will also be presenting a film from Arnold and explore his artistic concept and his artistic effect on his audience. Next, we'll dive into an author's position and our own observations of his work and what makes it so important. Finally, our presentation will conclude with a quick summation of the critical points that we've raised and offer additional resources that you can access to find out more information about our chosen filmmaker. We will additionally present a homage short film that we have created to hopefully capture and represent Arnold's unique filmmaking style.
During Arnold's childhood in Vienna, classic Hollywood films caused Arnold to have great expectations of adulthood. He found the reality of growing up very disappointing, and Arnold grew up with and was influenced by fellow Austrian experimental filmmaker Peter Kubelka, particularly Kubelka's careful frame-by-frame editing style, and Arnold was also known for re-editing live-action films, but his more recent work has fixated on animation. Arnold manipulates film footage by exploring the concept of repetition through the means of optically scrubbing back and forth. Putting this into practice can transform entering a room into a Herculean effort as the door repetitiously flaps back and forth mechanically, invoking Fugue-like moments of picture and sound. Arnold's source material often lies in the realm of classical American cinema, and this glossy Hollywood iconography is intriguing to Arnold and motivates him to uncover ideas that were suppressed and hidden behind these pieces of classic cinema. His method is carried out through selective and meticulous reorganization of traditional frame-to-frame flow of images and sound. His craft is highly selective and must work on both a conceptual and aesthetic level. Arnold's films are composed of rapidly cut sequences where several seconds of classic American Hollywood clips are retrieved and stretched out into extended pieces of work. Subjects on screen typically flip back and forth between frames simultaneously as the motion is repeated and reversed while multiple single-frame cuts are made. The intent behind his methods is to create or potentially uncover secret narratives that were hidden behind these mundane films. In his works Pièce Touchée and Passage à l'acte, several seconds are taken from the human jungle and To Kill a Mockingbird to construct a bizarre storyline about aggression and tension forming within a traditional American family. Arnold's work as an experimental filmmaker can be described as part structural film, part rap, and part seizure or stutter. He manipulates movement and timing of film by utilizing an optical printer to alter 16mm films, thereby creating an effect similar to the scratching of a record. The effect on the motion of the film causes it to seize and convulse in repetitive patterns of time, and Arnold has an experimental film trilogy composed of Pièce Touchée and Passage à l'acte and A Lone Life Waste Andy Hardy, and these motion studies are conducted through footage taken from classic Hollywood cinema and dissected to uncover hidden messages beneath the surface of the original narrative, and these films both belong in the categories of experimental and new media as they reveal information behind distinctive patterns of time, and they demonstrate a temporality that serves to manage the status quo and deny any real change. Arnold grew up watching Peter Kubelka's films, which influenced his frame-by-frame and structural thinking. Kabelka was primarily fixated on the possibilities of specific film articulations with forms that can only be created within a film. He placed a focus on what was happening between the frames, and as a result he also attempted to work against representation within a single frame. Arnold himself works with the image itself and how it presents certain places, subjects, and actions, but also the dreams, hopes, and taboos of the society that created it. Another major influence for Arnold was his friend Walter Jeklitz, who made use of scenes from old films to demonstrate a computerized projector to Arnold. He built it in a way so that it could project images at any range of speed from 2 to 25 frames per second, and Arnold specifically recalls viewing a scene from The Human Jungle that took place in a kitchen. The P.S. Touche couple are having a conversation as the man is reaching into a drawer to get out a knife. With the projector speed being only 4 frames per second, the event became thrilling, with every minute moment being dragged out and transformed into a small concussion. While viewing this, Arnold was convinced the scene was a part of a crime story, and the man would be threatening the woman with the knife. However, to his surprise, the man was not a murderer, and in actuality her husband, who was merely preparing a sandwich for his wife, and Walter could sense Arnold's excitement, so he gave him the roll of film, and Arnold immediately went home and began combing through the footage with a magnifying glass and decided to begin conducting optical printing experiments, starting with the 18-second shot that he uses for his film, P.S. Touche. Arnold's films act as a reminder for the audience that the discontinuity of individual frames that underlies all of cinema and the way that conventional spectatorial pleasure is inextricably yoked for the desire for movement and continuity. Arnold is by no means engaging in the destruction of visual pleasure. Instead, he is highlighting the discontinuity that haunts all cinema by heightening the viewer's awareness of the terms of pleasure and even accentuating it to an enjoyable and at times comical degree. One of Arnold's most explicit films is Alone Life Wastes Andy Hardy, as it exploits the repressed sexuality that lies underneath classic Hollywood cinema. Arnold opens his film with Andy Hardy kissing his mother in a scene that would traditionally be an innocent and inconsequential goodbye. However, with the use of optical printing, the encounter is transformed into a scene filled with incestuous indecency, and at work we are seeing a different narrativization that provokes the viewer to question their initial thoughts on the interaction and scene. Arnold is diving deeper beyond the surface to uncover the film's intent and the more sublime expressions of emotion in the subtle choreography and unconscious kinetics.
So our first quote is, "Forms, colors, and contrasts and rhythms don't affect the spectator in the realm of language and logic. They communicate on deeper levels." So to explain this quote, Arnold's way of working with media was very sensual. He wouldn't work towards a logical aim or message, he would feel his way through the material. And our second quote, "There is always something behind that which is being represented, which is not represented, and it is exactly that which is most interesting to consider." So Arnold viewed traditional Hollywood cinema as limited and disappointing in how it regurgitated certain recurring tropes and archetypes. So he was always looking for something deeper, more interesting, hidden in plain sight that he could bring out. So our third quote here, "To put in general terms, in the symptom the repressed declares itself." Hollywood cinema is a cinema of exclusion, denial, and repression. I inscribe a symptom into it which brings some of the aspects of repression onto the surface, or to say in more modest words, which gives an idea of how behind an intact world being represented, another not at all intact world is lurking. Maybe this is my revenge on film history. Now we're going to play a clip from an interview with Martin Arnold.
I think the main aspect of the repetition is that it makes it possible for the spectator to really watch things, because like movies work with a certain speed, and so things go by very, very fast. And if you want to look at tiny details, you can do that through repetition. The complicated issue at the moment simply is that some artists show in the art world and others show at film festivals and in movie theaters. So there is a wide range of work going on, but I think that that the tendency is to move out of the cinema and to show things in an art context, to work with galleries, museums. I mean, it's actually.
The film of our choice is Passage à l'Acte, where Arnold focuses on a domestic scene where a father orders his son to not leave the dinner table until his sister has finished her meal. Arnold breaks down the political layers of this conventional interaction. He reimagines the scene into a breathtaking and hilarious ballet between the characters, accompanied with a soundtrack that further influences the scene in this new direction. The film deconstructs the portrayal of a classic family in a 33-second sequence from the film To Kill a Mockingbird. The sequences shown last around 3 to 15 pictures, with an alternative speed of 24 frames per second. The film is dedicated to the criticism of a family scenario that starts with the father saying an incomprehensible utterance as his son runs out of the room. This frame has the duration of about 5 seconds and is not edited with the time manipulation technique. However, as the film proceeds, it is edited using the time loop techniques to flesh out the tension in the scene. The father looks at the mother with raised eyes. In return, the mother makes a small movement with her body. Notably, Arnold stays on this sequence for 15 seconds, and throughout the hidden intention and messages of the scene are clarified. Passage à l'Acte is unique, as it is entirely composed of a short portion of To Kill a Mockingbird and stretches what was originally only a mere seconds into an over 10-minute long short film. This specific scene involves the Finch family having breakfast gathered around the table as the children prepare for their first day back to school. In the grand scheme of the original film, this scene is not notable and does not hold any relationship to the drive of the overall plot. Even so, Arnold takes this sequence and extends it through the duplication of frames to generate numerous repetitions and reversals in the various moments. This exploration of the scene results in jarring visual excitement and creates beats and rhythms that pop off the screen. The mise-en-scène of this sequence strategically places the framing of this nuclear traditional family while eating a meal together. The woman of the right of the screen can easily be identified as the mother because of her actions, or moreover, in actions because she is immobile and silent throughout the scene, further promoting the passivity of female characters within traditional Hollywood narratives. The father takes on the role of the leader of the household, with his powerful verbal and gestural commands that lean towards the greater masculine authority. The hierarchy of the family is presented in this scene as the father orders his son to obey. Then, the son orders the daughter. In turn, she gives in to the masculine authority and inherits her mother's passivity.
Scott McDonald explores how Martin Arnold's films became noteworthy contributions to the avant-garde tradition of recycling material from earlier films into new pieces of work that would explicitly or implicitly critique the original texts. Arnold's specific approach to this technique is through the found footage films that introduces cinematic stutters into the smooth facade of the classical Hollywood imagery. The purpose behind this recycling technique is a means of tripping up the forward push of a conventional narrative. Arnold made use of his homemade optical printer to analyze visual motion in an 18-second shot, The Human Jungle 1954, and a visual and auditory motion in a 33-second passage from To Kill a Mockingbird 1962. In Arnold's Pièce Touchée, a husband returns home and is greeted by his wife. Arnold takes this minuscule interaction and breaks it down further through his optical printer that deciphers the gender-political implications of the husband's arrival. He then alters this simple gesture into a phantasmagoria of visual effects. His wife in the frame is passively waiting for him to enter. As he arrives, she is motivated by his movements to move herself. As the husband begins opening the door, the wife's head is shifted towards the direction of the door, and as his hand shuts it, her head swings the same way. This interaction demonstrates the underlying theme of the wife being a puppet that is attached to her husband by strings. In McDonald's view of Arnold's film Pièce Touchée, he sees it as a combination of the strategies of his earlier films and pre-cinematic explorers. He understands it as a motion study of a social artifact and an exploration of the possibilities of a single shot, and an apparatus to transform conventional narratives into magic. MacDonald believes that it is a revenge on the history of film and a look at the history of humankind, and filmmaking history as a whole. Despite at the time Arnold only having 2 films in his distribution, MacDonald wanted to interview and write about Arnold's visual and auditory triumphs within his 2 films. He aimed to focus on the amount of thought that encapsulated within them and the considerable usefulness of their roles in educating those in cinema studies had fueled MacDonald's drive to organize this interview. MacDonald also considered Arnold to potentially be one of the most impressive presences in the Austrian independent cinema movement that began to contribute significantly to the film history in the 1950s. Alright, now to conclude this presentation, Martin Arnold's work presents an excellent in-depth dissection of a variety of classic Hollywood films. It is a similar idea to break down videos or film essays on YouTube. Nowadays, a majority of casual viewers do not take the time to dive into one specific film, as we're bombarded with so much media and an abundance of watching options. This does not allow for the breathtaking space to take an in-depth look at specific films unless it's the biggest blockbuster of the year and is receiving all the buzz. Arnold's films take an interesting look beneath the surface of what is being shown in a film and deciphers what hidden meanings might be found if you manipulate the footage or look deeper into the subtle body language of the actors. Now we're going to take a look, to finally conclude this presentation, at a short film homage inspired by Martin Arnold's work.
Please, Will. Please, Will. Please, Will.
I sent a man up 5 years ago for murder. He was supposed to hang, but up north they commuted it to life. 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 Commuted it to life.
Still don't understand. Still don't understand. Still don't understand. Still don't understand.
Murder. Stay at the hotel until it's over.